Welcome back to the Geeky Pastimes Gaming News Podcast. We'll do all of the talking and stuff at the end, so let's get straight on with the news. The first piece of news is that the Golem developer, Daedalic, has laid off the team of 25 developers. They're basically their game development team, and exited game development. So this is something that we've been covering for a while. We've been talking for a while about the idea of, Golem was a shockingly bad game. Not just it was a bad game and it wasn't any fun, blah, blah, blah. But it was shocking that they released it. It was shocking that that game came out at all. But it did, and it bombed. And now Daedalic have decided, yeah, we're not very good at this whole game development thing. We're just going to publish games, which is what they did before anyway. They did have another Lord of the Rings game in development that has been cancelled. They're not making that anymore. So it's partly it's sad, you think anytime a game developer shuts down, that's a sad thing. But also, it makes sense. It makes sense that they would shut this down. It was maybe a little bit much. To bring out a game that was in that state is kind of taking the piss a little bit, I think. That's kind of not okay. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting. So there was going to be no more of that kind of train wreck. I was expecting the next Lord of the Rings game from Daedalic to be as bad as Golem and to have this long protracted development and stuff like that. But we're not going to get that anymore. In similar news, kind of, the Pokemon Go developer, Niantic, I know we don't really talk about mobile games very much, but Pokemon Go is one of the few mobile games that I did play a lot of. Pretty much everyone did that summer where everyone was wandering around and it was beautiful sunshine and everyone was having a lovely time catching little Pokemon and stuff like that. The developer, Niantic, for people who don't know, actually already had a game that was very, very much like Pokemon Go when it came out. So they already had this game that's something to do with portals or something. And, the idea is that you would go around the real world and find these portals and do something. Then they got the Pokemon license and they made Pokemon Go, and obviously it's a massive success. Then, since then, they made loads of other games that were basically the same game. Basically the same game, but, I think one of them was Monster Hunter came out fairly recently. I think there might have been a Jurassic Park one. I might be making some of these up, but I feel was there a Transformers one? I don't know. No, maybe not a Transformers. I would have liked a Transformers one. Harry Potter, I think that was them still, Niantic. There was just lots and lots of different versions of Pokemon Go, but just with different licenses. And apparently, none of them did well. None of them were enough to keep the lights on. So they're laying off hundreds of staff. So it's interesting, you look at the Golem developers, we're shutting down all our game development. That means we're firing 25 people, which is terrible for those 25 people. Niantic are laying off hundreds of staff. Gives you an idea of how big that company was. And they've just cancelled their Marvel project. They're working on a Marvel branded Pokemon Go, but that's gone too. So they're not going to do that anymore. They've said that they just want to focus on Pokemon Go now. I think they've even said the other day, there was some press release where they were saying that they know they haven't been doing very good with Pokemon Go. They haven't been doing a very good job of it, that the updates haven't been of a high enough quality when they've done events and stuff's been broken. So they've decided rather than kind of stretching their staff thin, I was about to say rather than stretching their staff thin, they're focusing on Pokemon Go, but that's not quite right. Rather than stretching their staff thin, they fired most of them. But they're just going to, focus all of their company's efforts on Pokemon Go. I guess that's the thing that's making them money. That's the thing that's they're getting a huge amount of income from. So they're okay, let's just keep doing that rather than constantly trying to break into something else. Because I kind of get the impression, and I might be wrong here, but I kind of get the impression that there is a limited group of people that are willing to go and play a mobile game that involves them walking around and doing stuff. And so when they released the Harry Potter version of Pokemon Go, I would guess that a lot of the people who played that were people who play Pokemon Go. A lot of the people were just people who play Pokemon Go and were hey, now I can do a Harry Potter version of this. Rather than what I assume they were hoping for, which was attracting a new audience, attracting a new group of people to their format. I think they were just cannibalizing their own player base with lots of other products, which obviously costs a huge amount to develop. So yeah, not a massive surprise again, but the numbers surprised me. The fact that it was hundreds of staff, that did kind of surprise me a little bit. Also, just want to say hi to all of the people in chat. Thank you to everyone who's shown up. Who have we got in here? Dr. Rimbo, GXidid, Joe W, Felix, Adam H. And Adam H, thank you so much for becoming a member for your 6th month. That's awesome. Hi, Lord of Terror, Flynn, Adam, Bod, SoCal Canna, Callum, Welcome, all of you. For anyone who doesn't know, I am doing these podcasts. I was originally doing them daily. I've had kind of a couple of weeks off because I was on holiday for a week, and then my wife was also on holiday for another week, so we just kind of chilled for a week. I'm not sure if we're going to go back to daily. We might go to weekly. We might just go to sporadic when there's gaming news. Haven't really decided. Always super interested to hear feedback on what you think of the podcast format and how often you would like to see it, how often you think makes sense for it. I am also doing a little bit of an experiment and streaming this on Kick as well, because Kick just did a thing where, as a viewer now, you can choose to opt out of any gambling stuff, which I quite like the idea of. I wish, as a streamer, I had an option to opt out of any gambling stuff, so no gambling stuff was ever put on my page. That would probably make me stream a bit more on Kick. But I need to keep my options open. I need to make money as a streamer. I need to make money as a content creator. And right now, I'm struggling a little bit with YouTube and Twitch. And it's always like, do I just bring all my streams back over to YouTube? Do I try a new platform? Like, do I try Kick? Do I try Trovo? Do I try whatever? It's always worth trying stuff. So because I can use Restream with YouTube, I'm trying this with the podcast. And then after this, I'll go play some Call of Duty on Kick for this morning and see how that goes. But yeah. Now, I'm not like shutting down my Twitch channel or anything. I'm not doing like a big move again. I'm more just dipping my toe in the water and seeing what it's like, seeing what the temperature's like, and seeing if I want to carry on with that. So do let me know what you think. I'd be interested in your thoughts, especially you lot, the 20 or so of you that are watching now. You're kind of the diehard people who are here every day. You're liking the stream every day. You are supporting me. I know it hurts you if I keep on jumping around from different platforms. It makes it harder for you. But yeah, like where would be the best place for me to keep all my gaming streams and keep the podcast and stuff like that? Flynn was just saying, just an idea, maybe like Mondays and Fridays, the gaming news at the start of the week and at the end of the week. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's more than anything, it's kind of what's a good use of my time. There isn't enough gaming news really to do it every day, I don't think. Like sometimes, especially over the summer, would be really, really scratching stuff. I did play with the idea of maybe doing the podcast every day, but some days it's just really short. Some days it's like 20 minutes long. I thought about maybe doing that, and that's an option maybe. I didn't know if people just wouldn't like it. I don't like it if a podcast I normally listen to that takes an hour that I save for like when I'm going on a run or something. If it's shorter than usual and it's like, oh, that's annoying. Like that hasn't filled up the amount of time it normally does in my routine. That's kind of annoying to me. So I don't know about that. But maybe. And no, Flynn's back at work, SoCal Canuck, so I'll be doing some DMZ solo today, which will be terrifying. Anyway, back to the game. By the way, the reason I did some gaming news but when we started is because I got fed up listening to the Kind of Funny podcast, where at the beginning of it, I literally have to skip about 10 minutes of their podcast before they start talking about gaming news. They do a daily gaming news podcast, and I literally have to skip 10 minutes of it before I get to the gaming news, which is too much. And it's hard, and you never quite know. It could be 7 minutes, it could be 13 minutes, but they do a lot of kind of just, it's the Kind of Funny podcast at the beginning, and they're very successful, so there's probably a reason they do all that stuff at the beginning. But it just kind of annoys me when it's like, say if I've got a 10-minute drive somewhere. Ninja Cat, thank you so much for the super chat. You're very generous to this channel. You have supported me no end, Ninja Cat, so thank you so much. Yeah, like, sometimes, if I'm doing the washing up and I'm just like, oh, I'll put a podcast on. It's annoying if I put on the Kind of Funny podcast and it's like 10 minutes of like nothing. 10 minutes of nothing happening. It kind of sucks. But yeah, so anyway, that's just my 10 cents about that. So I was just wondering why did an alert come up on screen then? An alert should have come up on screen, but I don't know if I saw one for that super chat. I heard the noise, but I don't know if I saw anything. Anyway, let's get back to some more gaming news. So, Baldurs Gate 3. This is a game that I'm quite excited about, but it was going to be coming out very close to Starfield, and I was a bit like, it's a bit of a weird one, Baldurs Gate 3, because it's been out on PC on early access for ages, which I find very strange for an RPG. And I didn't want to play it because I didn't want to be like, oh, I'll play it in early access, then I'll have to play it again on a full release. I think it was just the first act or something in early access, but still, I just didn't want to do that. So I've been waiting for the full release, and now they've moved the PC release date forwards rather than delaying it. They've moved it forwards like 3 weeks. So now it's coming out on the 3rd of August, which is pretty cool. Like 3rd of August is a good time. There's not really any other games coming out in August, so I'm happy about that. Still not sure if I can play all the way through Baldur's Gate 3 in August before Starfield comes out on the 1st of September. Like, that's I don't really want to start Baldur's Gate and then not finish it. But we'll see. I might play it. I might try and go for it. The PlayStation 5 version of it has apparently been delayed a little bit because, you know, I don't know, they need a bit more time to work on it. And they've annoyingly delayed it to the 6th of September, which is the proper day Starfield comes out, which is insane. High Lord of Terror said he played Baldur's Gate on GameCube. On GameCube? That seems crazy to me, the idea of playing it on GameCube. I can't even imagine it. I never played the first Baldur's Gate. I played Baldur's Gate 2 on PC and really loved that. It was like the first one of those kind of RPGs I ever played. I don't know what version of it came out on GameCube, because Baldur's Gate is just like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, isn't it? It's just a place within Dungeons and Dragons. So I don't know how related all of the different games are. By the way, did anybody see Ninja Cat Super Chat? Was there an alert up on screen for that? I need to double check that. I need to double check that that's working. There should have been, but I don't know how my stream alerts are working and stuff like that at the moment. I'm slightly worried that I did something and broke it, so now only Twitch alerts come up. I should play the Enhanced Edition on Steam. What, of Baldur's Gate 1? Oh, maybe. I don't know. I can't bother now. I'll play Baldur's Gate 3. Max said, doesn't Baldur's Gate 3 have 500 hours of cinematics? Don't think you'll be able to get through it in a month. Oh, there was an alert. Awesome. Good. I just missed it. But when they say 500 hours of cinematics, I would hazard a guess that, especially with a game like Baldur's Gate, I would guess they're being a bit sneaky with that number. Because, like, for example, you can play as lots of different races. Are there different versions of the same cinematic with each of the different races? Say there's like 10 races, and now suddenly there's only 50 cinematics. Hey, Affers just became member for the 2nd month. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Affers. Appreciate it. Yeah, is there like... is there going to be cinematics that are basically the same cinematic but doubled up? I know a few games have done that in the past where they've been like, oh, you know, there's 400 hours of gameplay, but it's only really 50 hours, but there's 8 different characters. And, you know, that's that sort of stuff. Because like, 500 hours seems insane. Like, what was the last RPG that had 500 hours of gameplay, let alone cinematics? Like, that would be insane. I don't know if you're just exaggerating. Yeah, you might not see 40% of them based on your choices. I reckon you might not see 80% of them based on your choices. I'm not sure. But yeah, I would be shocked if Baldur's Gate was more than a 50-hour game, to be honest. Like, just from what I've seen of it so far, from what I've heard about the early access and stuff like that, I would kind of expect it to be like, if you just played through the story, and I'm sure if you did all the side quests and stuff, you'd be looking like 200 hours or something. But I'd be surprised if it was like 50 hours. Like, more than 50 hours. Just to play through the story. Like, even when you think of, like, the biggest RPGs, they're not much bigger than that. Like, I've always had it in my head that, like, oh, you know, I don't want to get into playing, like, Final Fantasy or something because it's going to take 200 hours. But when you actually sit down and play them, they don't take that long. It's only if you're, like, really trying to grind out absolutely everything. You know, people who play Skyrim, you can finish Skyrim. You know, even if you're playing normally, even if you're not speedrunning, you could finish Skyrim in 20 hours, I think. Fairly easily. But obviously people have spent hundreds of hours in it because, you know, they like the universe and they like wandering around and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm hoping Baldur's Gate will have like a route through like that. Although you never know. I mean, I remember playing Metal Gear Solid 4, and when I first got it, I'd never played a Metal Gear Solid game before. That was the first one I played, just because I didn't have PlayStations before that. I put on Metal Gear Solid 4, and it opens with like a 45-minute cutscene. And I was like, what is this? Like, I've got no idea what's going on. I don't know who these characters are. And it's like 45 minutes of talking. I was just like, that's absolutely insane. There's too much for me. So yeah, if I hear something like 500 hours of cutscenes in Baldur's Gate 3, is that the number or did you just exaggerate that? Right, I'm going to look it up. Baldur's Gate 3 cutscenes. Oh, 174 hours apparently. According to Game Rant, they said that Larian Studios has said there are 174 hours of cutscenes. That's a lot of cinematics. Sorry, not cut. Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference is between a cutscene and a cinematic. Oh, and it says, yeah, there's 174 hours of cinematics. However, it's unlikely that anyone will see all of those cutscenes in a single playthrough. Yeah, it said with several different characters and possible branching paths, it's probable that Larian's counting all the content the company created, not everything that someone would experience. Yeah, so if there's a bunch of different races and stuff like that, they probably have different ones. And then they'll be like, if you're good, if you're evil, if you're like neutral somehow. That's probably what will happen. Right, the next news story, just kind of another kind of bit of a downer, really. There's a few downers this week of things getting closed. Oh, sorry, before we get on to that, Max said Final Fantasy 16 is amazing, by the way, not sure if you played it. Yeah, I did a video about it on my YouTube. Nobody watched it, so it's fair enough that you didn't see that. But yeah, I'm absolutely loving Final Fantasy 16. I don't know how far through it I am. Like, it's really hard to tell. There was a point where I was getting a bit worried. I was playing it loads over the last weekend, and there was a point where I was getting to a point where I was like, oh no, am I like near the end of this? Like, am I sort of getting towards the end of the story? I feel like I'm flying through it because I had been playing it a lot. Like, I've been playing it a huge amount over the weekend. And then I got to a place where it was like, oh, hey, this is a new system in the game. And it looks like one of the most basic systems in the game. And I only just got it. So I was like, oh, am I just in the tutorial still? Like with Final Fantasy, it's always impossible to tell. Like the game could finish after 15 hours or it could just be getting started at 15 hours. I'm not sure how long I've spent on it. But it was definitely... It was a weird moment where story-wise, I felt like it was moving towards a conclusion. And then it was just like, oh yeah, like, by the way, this is like, we're still introducing new gameplay mechanics to you. And I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. But yeah, so I've got no idea how far through Final Fantasy I am. I would guess I'm probably about a third to halfway through it, but based on what I know now. But yeah, it was a bit strange. Absolutely amazing. I loved Final Fantasy. I've loved Final Fantasy 16 so far. Yeah, Findlay, I was the same. I was kind of on the fence Final Fantasy 16. Then I played the demo and was like, oh, this is just an incredible game. It's weird, actually. Over the weekend, I've been playing games that I don't normally play. Like, I played a bit of Warzone. Some of you might have seen a Twitch stream where I was playing with Emil. And we won a couple of games, duos on Vondel. That was fun. We had some good games then. I might make one of them into a video today because they were very funny. Although one of the games I won, I didn't actually get any kills in, which is a bit embarrassing. But anyway, yeah, then I've been playing Final Fantasy 16 and Formula 1 2023. I've been playing loads of that. I just kind of started that yesterday, really. After watching the Grand Prix, I got kind of into playing the ranked mode on Formula 1 2023. I know if I stream it, people won't really watch it very much, but I was really enjoying it. I'm tempted. I might stream some later. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. But I was kind of enjoying playing that. So it's a little bit frustrating sometimes because you end up in this weird situation where obviously some people, when they're playing racing games, just like barrel through every corner and smash people out of the way. But it has this weird license thing. And I haven't played many games. So I was in those early games with people who drive all over the place and all the collisions were turned off and blah, blah, blah. And then I've started getting moved up. And now I've been put in the top license because I drive so sensibly. And now it's like, so full damage and everything's on. And you still get people who just do the stupidest things. Like, you know, you're going to overtake them and they'll just like slam on their brakes to make you run in the back of them because that gives you a penalty and not them. Or like you'll be pulling alongside them and they'll just push you off the track. Like they just don't care. And that's very frustrating. Yeah, Sim Racer, I don't think so, Affers. I'm still playing on a controller and I'm still playing with an automatic gearbox. I'm tempted to try playing manual, but I don't know if it would actually make me any faster. But yeah, I'm tempted to try playing manual. Maybe that's what I'll do on a stream. Geeky learns manual on Formula 1. But we'll see. Anyway, the news. Going back to news. Mojang, who are the people who make Minecraft. So remember, Notch originally made Minecraft and he made this company called Mojang. Then Microsoft bought it, Notch left. So Microsoft kind of run this company, Mojang, who make Minecraft. They have ended official support for the Minecraft subreddit. And this isn't anything to do with all of the other problems that Reddit's going through lately. They literally said, and in quotes, it's no longer an appropriate place to post official content. And I thought this was really interesting. And it's something that I think is kind of a sign of the times for social media more than anything else. So for those of you who are young and don't remember the days, there used to be a time, not that long ago really, not that far in the distant past, where the only place you would ever get official updates for video games was on their forums. And every video game would have their own forum. Sometimes, you know, there'd be like an EA forum or Ubisoft forum, and then it would have different, what do you call it? Sub-forums? Threads? Not even that. Like, what's the bit in between a forum and a thread? I don't know. Anyway, there'd be separate sections of the forum for different games sometimes. But generally, you had to sign up for a forum. And that had a really kind of interesting effect on the way people talked in those forums. Because A, very few people would ever sign up for the forums. Like, it was rare that people would sign up for forums because it's a faff, you know, getting another password, another login, everything like that, just for a forum for one game. People wouldn't check it very often. And so you'd get a mixture of the people who were like super hardcore into these games, and you would get the people who wanted tech support. Like, those were the only two groups of people who were on these forums talking about the games. But it's also where patch notes would be. And it meant that, like, a lot of the time, you wouldn't really find out about the patches for games. Like, you just wouldn't get the patch notes. You wouldn't get the information unless you were super, super invested into them. Or, you know, you had a friend who was, and they would tell you about it. And there were some exceptions that, you know, like World of Warcraft and stuff like that, because it was going on for so long, eventually more people joined the forums. But even then, you know, that's still something where I'd say it's still the very hardcore people who played that. But that was the only place where really developers interacted with the fans, as it were, the players. And it was somewhere that the gaming company had complete control over. So that had a lot of good aspects to it. Obviously, they could just ban anybody they wanted. They could just get rid of people who were toxic, you know, and they could sort of moderate like that. But it also tended to make it a little bit kind of bland is maybe the wrong word, but it meant that, you know, maybe it was a bit more, people didn't feel like they could just talk about the game because they're worried about getting banned. And it meant that often you'd get like dead forums. You'd get forums that were empty because it was like only the hardcore players who did it. Everybody knows hardcore players hate the games they play. And so they weren't actually interacting that much. So a lot of forums for games were just basically dead. And so you had this weird situation where if you wanted to find out stuff about a game, you'd have to go onto these completely dead forums where occasionally there'd be patch updates. And that was kind of it. And then over time with social media, you ended up with game accounts, you know, gaming community managers and stuff like that, interacting with fans in different ways. So Reddit was a big one of those. You know, Reddit, because it kind of works like a forum, the companies could set up their own subreddits, or they would sometimes, you know, find the most popular fan subreddit and then kind of give it official status. You know, they'd get a couple of their moderators on the team and they would post updates there. And then, you know, other people did stuff with Twitter or with Facebook or Discord and stuff like that. And it's starting to, I would say it's starting to collapse now, the idea of using all of these social media things. Because I think the biggest problem with using all of these different social media platforms is that the people in charge, the gaming creators, don't have that much power there. Like, they don't have that much say a lot of the time over who's doing stuff. It's very easy for people to just make new accounts and things like that. It's very hard for them to set the rules and how things work. And it means that all of the toxicity that's present on all of those types of communities, you know, on Reddit, on Twitter, on Discord, kind of bubbles into their spaces. And I think it's really telling. Let's say Call of Duty, you know, it's the thing that we all know. Call of Duty doesn't ever talk about their subreddit or their Discord. Ever, really, do they? Like, I can't remember the last time they were like, hey, you should check out the official Call of Duty Discord, or you should check out the Call of Duty subreddit. They just don't, because they don't want to push people there, because it's toxic, because it's horrible. Like, if you've been in the Call of Duty Discord, it's horrific. Like, really kind of properly just, you know, what you think of the worst type of Call of Duty players. They're all on Discord, apparently. And the same with the subreddit. You get, you know, a lot of people being very angry with each other, a lot of people being very whiny and stuff like that. So they've kind of always had a hands-off thing. And the only thing that Call of Duty ever really promotes is their Twitter and their Instagram. Like, those two things they push. Occasionally, they have done in the past their Facebook a little bit as well, which I think is more of a thing for other regions. But yeah, it's kind of been interesting. And anyway, Mojang have said that, yeah, they're not going to be a part of the subreddit anymore. They just don't think it's a good place to post official content. They don't want to be attached to it. They don't want, I think the biggest problem is they don't want to be seen to be encouraging people to go there. They're like, yeah, this is a bad place. We don't want to go there. And if we're posting stuff on it, if they're posting patch notes, like, that's the place to go to get the patch notes. That's a bad thing. Like, that's not a good place they want to go to. And I genuinely think over time, we're just going to go back to them having their own forums and stuff like that. Them having their own places that they can control. I mean, if anything, I sort of think that we'll end up in a place where game developers don't really talk to fans very much. I saw someone the other day talking about Twitter, you know, all the Twitter problems since the 1st of July. where they didn't pay their Google bills or something, and now like Twitter's horrendously breaking. And every time you go on the app, it's like a fun thing to see like what's going to work today. It's just like imploding. And I saw amongst all of the people laughing about how it's imploding, which I am enjoying. I am really enjoying that drama of everyone being like, hey, Twitter's absolutely screwing itself. Let's watch it. Let's just watch it all burn down. I'm enjoying that. I'm finding that fun. But I saw someone post a tweet where they were saying that, like, this isn't really just a Twitter problem. Like, I know Twitter has its own specific problems. Elon Musk, basically. But Twitter has its own specific problems. But, like, social media in general, I think the tide is turning more and more, where when something doesn't work, like we can't access Twitter for 12 hours, everyone's like, oh, I actually feel better. Like, I actually like not being on Twitter for 12 hours. And I think whereas, there's people looking for alternatives like Blue Sky and Mastodon and things like that, because they want to keep their business side of it alive. The main thing that I need Twitter for me, is speaking to brands, like speaking to developers, publishers, blah, 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 trying to get game keys off people, trying to get involved in events and stuff like that. Like, that's essentially what I need Twitter for. I don't think I get many people come look at my content because of Twitter. I think that's very, very rare. Even though I've got like a healthy amount of followers, I think I've got like 13,000 followers on Twitter. I don't get business, I don't get like money from it or anything like that. And then I often think, like, if Twitter just went down, if Twitter just disappeared, would I care that much? Like, I think it would be a good thing. I don't think I'd be looking for, hey, I need another place where I can see the opinions of loads of random people. Because, like, I've seen lots of people suggest, what Twitter should be good for. And this is still connected to what I was talking about with game forums and stuff. But I've seen people talk about the idea that, Twitter should be a town hall. I think that was what Elon Musk said when he bought it. It's like, Twitter should be a town hall open for everyone. And it's like, the problems with Twitter are very similar to the problems of a real town hall meeting. If you've ever been to a public meeting, the problem is that it doesn't reflect everybody's opinion. It doesn't give everyone a voice. It gives the loudest people a voice. It gives the most aggressive people a voice. It gives the people that are the most willing to lie a voice. The people who don't care about the truth. The people who don't care about accuracy or logic or reason or anything like that. The people who just want to be the loudest in the room and they want to be right. It makes life very, very easy for them. Because, you go into a town hall thing, it's just whoever shouts the loudest. If you can shout loudest and you can intimidate people, the other people who will be intimidated will be very, very quiet. And the loudest people will sort of win the argument. And the same thing happens in Twitter. On Twitter, someone will be toxic, someone will say stupid things, they'll make stupid claims. And everyone knows, if you say a stupid thing, that's very easy. Trying to refute a stupid thing is much harder, especially if you're talking to a stupid person. If someone makes a stupid claim, they can say whatever they want on Twitter very, very easily and just say, someone could go on there and say like, well, it's a fact that all penguins can fly. And then it's like, trying to prove that no penguins can fly is a much harder thing to do, especially if you say like, well, look here on Wikipedia, it says no penguins can fly. And they'll be like, well, Wikipedia is just owned by Marxist commies. And then you'd be like, okay, well, what about like here, like this, but Nature Journal says that it doesn't do it. And they'll be like, oh, well, what academia is like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's impossible to argue with people. It doesn't matter how wrong they are. You can't argue against those people. And that's what Twitter's become. It should be a place where no one gets intimidated because it's just words on a website. It should be a place where people are just free to express themselves, so you would get like the full range of human perspectives. But you don't, because of the sort of the toxic nature of it. Normal people don't argue about stuff on Twitter. Normal people don't talk about stuff on Twitter because they don't want to, because it's not a pleasant experience, and so they just leave it. And who cares what other people think, in a way? It's like, I've always had this idea of it's a teacher in me trying to be like, I need to educate people, I need to make sure people see the right way, I need to change people's perspectives. And it's like, I don't think I've ever changed anyone's mind about anything like at all ever on Twitter. I think like that's never really happened. And I think, like, bringing this back around to the topic at hand, it's the same thing with gaming forums. It's the same thing with gaming subreddits and Discord and Twitter and stuff like that. of people have spent the last 10, I would say like 10, 15 years making a big deal of, we want to give players a voice. We want to let the community have their say. We want to listen to the community. And, you know, I'm sitting here being like, why? Why have we done that? Can you think of like many games where over the last 10, 15 years, since developers have really been giving communities a voice, communities have had a voice on Twitter and on Discord and on Reddit and stuff like that, and it has made the game better. Like, you look at all the long-running franchises, like World of Warcraft, people hate it. Call of Duty, people bloody hate it. League of Legends, Dota, Counter-Strike, whatever. People are always just like angry and hating everything. It hasn't made these games better. If anything, I would say it's massively stifled innovation and creativity, because people are very outspoken against anything that's different. You know, if they put a new, say if the new Call of Duty game was announced today and it was something completely different, it was like a fantasy game, or it was another, you know, real science fiction game or something like that, before anyone's played it, it would be like the most downvoted video on YouTube. It would have like thousands of people sending hate to all of the developers and the community managers and stuff like that. There'd just be an incredible backlash that then I imagine some executives, you know, Activision would be sitting there, Bobby Kotick would be like, well, people obviously don't like this idea. We should pivot away from this. And it's like, because people don't want to give new stuff a chance. They want the same thing. You know, what the Call of Duty community wants is for them to have the same game that feels the same as it did when they were teenagers. And, you know, that's obviously not possible, but that's what they want. So they're like, oh, we want maps from Modern Warfare 2. We want guns from Modern Warfare 2. We want, like, whatever. And then they get that, and then they don't want it because they realize that that's not actually what made that fun for them at the time. But it's like, it's this constant thing of they want stuff that they've already had before. And then when they get that, they're not happy either. But if they get something that's different to what they had before, they bloody hate that. They really rebel against it. And so I don't think there's any improvement to games from listening to the community. And people will say like, oh, you know, well, like, otherwise how would the developers find out about bugs and balance problems and stuff like that? They know all of that stuff, like, super easily. I think there's very little that the Call of Duty community has told the developers that needed to get fixed that they didn't already know. I think that's like super out. But the signal to noise ratio is so low because there's like so much stuff that isn't true that gets told. You know, there's so many people saying that like aim assist is a literal aimbot. You don't even have to touch your controller and you'll get like 1 million kills in every game. Or like, this gun's incredibly overpowered because I got killed by it. Or like, look, these people who have Chinese usernames are all cheating. And there's like stuff like that that's just obviously not true. But lots of people will say it, or some big content creator will say it, and then like everyone will just bandwagon it. And then like the developers have to sort through all of that nonsense. And it's not, again, going back to my point, it's not worth them refuting it. It's not worth them saying that's not true. Because proving that when a stupid person says something, proving that that thing is not true is not easy. It takes way too long, and it's just not worth it. It's the same reason, like, some of you might have seen that that whole thing of what was it? There was some doctor in America, I don't know their names or anything, and someone was arguing with them on the internet, and then Joe Rogan or someone like that was like, hey, you should come on my podcast and debate. And then they were like, we'll give $1 million to such and such a charity if you come on and debate. And then like people were like, you know, yeah, why wouldn't you debate? Why wouldn't you come on the show? Like, if you're so secure in your ideas, you should be willing to debate. And they're like, oh, he's not willing to debate because they're going to get destroyed. It's like, no, the reason he's not going to go on that show is because all you need, say if you're having a debate, a discussion about vaccines with an anti-vaxxer and a pro-vaccine person, the anti-vaxxer will throw out tons of false claims, just tons of lies. They'll just say stuff. They'll say whatever. They'll be like, 80% of people who took the vaccine are dead now, or like 89% of people who did this, or blah, blah, blah. And the other person, how do they refute that? How do they say that's not true? Other than just sitting there and being like, that's not true. Like, they would have to like go away and find a study that the person was talking about. You know, that other person could be like, Johnson and Birkin said that 62% of people, blah, 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 in their study in 2013. And then it's like, the person defending that, trying to stand up for, like, you know, the truth, would have to go and research that, find out what study they're talking about, read the study, and then try and work out, okay, where have they made the mistake? Where's the claims? Like, what's the evidence based on, stuff like that? And they can't. So the person who's willing to lie, the person who's willing to make up stuff, is just able to constantly throw stuff out. And the other person can't respond because they would just be constantly like having to stop and look stuff up and check things and then try and like argue against it, which isn't going to work. And then the other person is just going to argue in bad faith anyway and say like, well, it doesn't matter what you say because like, you know, again, Marxist penguins, that sort of thing. So Afas said there, I love the phrase, don't play chess with a pigeon, it'll just knock over the pieces and strut around like it won. Exactly, like you can't argue with these kind of people. And so game developers, I think, have realized that. Like the Call of Duty community are constantly saying things like, oh, like why doesn't, you know, Activision listen to us? Why doesn't Infinity Ward listen to us? Why don't they have these creator calls in public? Why don't they have them where, you know, why don't we have online conversations where you've got like J-God discussing stuff with the people who designed stuff at Infinity Ward? And it's like exactly this problem that like you've got a massive imbalance of expertise and knowledge there. You've got like someone who plays the game versus the people who made the game. And then the person who plays the game feels like they're right because they spend a lot of time playing it. They sort of look into it a lot. They read a lot about it, whatever. They feel like they know a lot, but they don't have access to most of the information. I would say all of us who play Call of Duty have access to like 5% of the information. I mean, that's probably being generous of like what the game is like, what the game's going on. You know, that you could say something like, you could make a claim saying like, the Dragon's Breath shotgun is overpowered. Everybody who plays it just wins games. And that could be because you've played 20 games this week. And in that, 15 of the games was won by someone using the Dragon's Breath shotgun. Let's say. I mean, that's obviously not true. That's obviously not happened. But let's say that's the thing. If you were then trying to convince Infinity Ward or Raven or whoever's in charge of this, that means that the Dragon's Breath shotgun is overpowered. Bear in mind, they will have the information on looking at all of the games of Warzone and what loadouts the people who won all of those games were using. They can look at the win rates of everyone who is using the Dragon's Breath shotgun in their loadout. They could look at the kill rates, you know, everybody who picks up a Dragon's Breath shotgun, how many kills they get on average compared to other guns. They could look at things like, okay, every time someone with a Dragon's Breath shotgun is fighting someone who's using an SO14, how often does the Dragon's Breath shotgun win? How often does the SO14 win? They could look at it like by different ranges, you know, within 5 meters, like 5 to 10 meters, 10 to 25 meters, blah, blah, blah. They've got access to all of that information, and they've got access to huge amounts of information that we don't have. So obviously they know more. And this is the same sort of thing, you know, when you see people arguing with like vaccine scientists, and it's like you've got people working on anecdotal information arguing against people that have actual scientific experimentation, you know, studies and all of this sort of thing. Like you've got people arguing with basically no information against the people who have all of the information. And it's like, why would you even give the time of day to those people who don't have any information? Why would you bother? Like, what's the point? That's like me going to Lewis Hamilton and telling him how he should be racing in a Formula 1 car because I've seen a load of Formula 1 races. And it's like, that's just dumb. Like, that's just a stupid thing to do. Because, like, obviously they know way more. Like, obviously they're in a much better position. And I just, like, I've spoken about this before. And it's like, the only thing players can really do that I think is of any value to developers is saying how they feel. Like, that's it. You can say, I'm not having fun with this, or I don't really enjoy this, or I do really enjoy this, and I am having fun with this. And that's it. Like, you know, you can say, oh, I find this kind of frustrating. Like when I say, you know, on things, I find the 6-man squads in DMZ super frustrating. Like, I find it really annoying. I'm not going to go out and make claims and say, every game there's a 6-man squad that just goes around and wipes all the rest of the players, just because I've seen that happen a few times every day. That doesn't mean that I don't know that. Like, obviously, if that sort of thing was happening, they would have the data on it. They would be able to do something about it. I can just say, I don't find this fun. I find this frustrating. You can talk about your feelings. And that's useful because obviously the more perspectives, the better. And so, like, I think with like the idea of developers having their official subreddits or Discords or Twitter accounts and stuff like that, it's not anything that I can see a benefit from. I think the real benefit, the real reason they do it, the real reason people care about it is that it makes players feel like they're listened to. Like, that's the thing, that's the benefit, is that players feel like they've been heard, and that makes them feel better. There's no actual, like, benefit to the game. There's no benefit to the developers. There's no tangible benefit anywhere there. But it's just there's a certain type of person that needs to feel heard, and that lets them feel like they've voiced their opinion. And the problem is, with the way social media is, if, like, the developers don't do exactly what the person wants, then they don't feel heard and they get angrier and stuff like that. So it almost feels like it'd be better if we went back to the old days of just having a complete separation, which, you know, isn't an unusual thing. Like, I don't think there's that many people who expect to, like, tell Chris Nolan how to make films, or expect them to be able to tell Stephen King how to write books, or tell them to expect to, you know, tell the creators of, like, Succession or something how to make their next TV show. Like, I feel like there is a separation with all those things, that you just know these people, these creative people and companies put out a product, and you either enjoy it or you don't, and you can talk about how you feel about it with other people, but you don't expect to be able to tell the people who made it what you think. But with video gaming, that's different, because they've gone for, like I said, for like 15, 20 years, they've gone for this whole thing of like, oh, we need to get the community involved, blah, blah, blah. You know, and there's probably a cynical part to it of like, if you can make people feel like they are part of a community. And, you know, I think this is very true, that, you know, with Call of Duty, if they make people think that they're part of a Call of Duty community and, you know, they feel like they've got a voice within that, they might be more willing to stick with Call of Duty as a franchise, because they're like, hey, yeah, I'm a Call of Duty fan. I follow all of these Call of Duty accounts. I watch all these Call of Duty videos. I blah, 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 blah. Then maybe it's like, that's a way of increasing brand loyalty. I definitely think I probably wouldn't be playing Call of Duty as much if it wasn't for that side of it, for the side that I'm part of a Call of Duty community. You know, I probably would have just abandoned it. I'll probably be loading up BattleBit Remastered or just playing Formula 1 2023 today. So yeah, like, I guess that's a benefit to them. But anyway, I'm just having a big rant. Oh, God. Sorry about that. I just accidentally clicked on the window for kick and then didn't realize it would autoplay. That's bad. Anyway, bit of a rant over. Sorry, that did end up being quite a long rant. We have more news to get through, so let's keep on going. Bloober Team. This is another thing of something shutting down, actually. Bloober Team, the people that made Layers of Fear recently, which was a remake of Layer... Is the new one Layers of Fears or Layer of Fears or something? And then the original one was called Layers of Fear? I don't know. There was some variation on that title, I think. Anyway, they make those horror games where you walk around a house and there's paintings and everything's messed up. I streamed a bit of it. It was fun. I enjoyed the demo for the new one. Anyway, they've said they're not going to make games like that anymore. They said they're closing the era of psychological horror games and moving to focus on gameplay. And apparently a part of this was after their games were referred to as walking simulators. So, you know, these games are kind of like that. How do you even... What's the new one called? Layers of Fear 2023? I don't know. Layers of Fear 2? I don't know what it's called. Yeah, the idea that, like, this is somehow a bad thing, that, like, these horror games where you're just walking around, that's a bad thing. They've said, you know, people, from what they can see, want gameplay. They want people to be, like, enjoying the gameplay of their games, and they're not at the moment. So they are deciding that they're going to shut that down. They're not going to make games like that anymore, and they're going to focus on gameplay instead. I mean, that Layers of Fear game came out, the new one, so I was just looking it up. It came out on the 15th of June, which is, 3 weeks ago. It's currently got 39 people playing it on Steam. The most it's ever had is 707. That's really bad. That's for a game that I think is quite, like, you know, quite a big PC game. You know, it's the sort of thing that people like playing on PC. To have 39 people playing it a few weeks after launch, like, that's really kind of shocking. So yeah, I think that game is a failure, and they've decided, okay, in future, they're going to work on gameplay. That, to me, is a sad thing, because it's like, oh, I actually really like horror games where the gameplay isn't the main focus. It's more about, you know, an interactive movie, basically, where you walk around and you experience stuff. But that being said, I also didn't buy Layers of Fear. I didn't play the full game when it came out, so I'm part of the problem, clearly. You know, when you see games like Amnesia or Outlast, I don't love that kind of stealth horror where you're like spending the whole game trying to sneak around and then running away from stuff. I don't really enjoy that. So, and that seems to be where a lot of people go with their horror games. So that's a shame. But yeah, I mean, they're not saying they're stopping making games. They're not firing anyone or anything like that. It's just they're changing the way they're making games. So they're gonna close the era of psychological horror games and are going to move to focus on horror games with gameplay instead. Then, another bloody game, another company that's shutting stuff down. Like I said, there's a lot of this week. This news seems to be mostly about things being shut down. The Cycle Frontier, that game which came out, is made by the people who made Spec Ops: The Line, which I didn't actually know that. Like, it was only until this news story broke last week that I found that out. The Cycle Frontier is made by the people who made Spec Ops: The Line. Weird, it's a completely different type of game. Anyway, for people who don't know, it was an extraction shooter. I would say it was one of the first big extraction shooters that wasn't like from a major publisher or was... Well, no, that's probably not true. If you think, like, when I think of extraction shooters, I always think, like, The Division was the first one. The Division was the first one I would say was an extraction shooter, but it was just a mode within The Division. You know, it was a dark zone. Is a feature within it. And then you had Sea of Thieves, and then you had Escape from Tarkov, and then you had, what's it called? Hunt Showdown. And then, like, I feel like with the Hunt Showdown, Escape from Tarkov, and their popularity, then people started taking this genre seriously, and they started being like, oh, the extraction shooter, like, this is going to be the next big thing. And I feel like the Cycle was the first one from that. Like, the first one where it's like, hey, we're making a new game that's not a new Battle Royale. Instead, we're making an extraction shooter. And I feel like they made it and released it, and it wasn't very good at first, and then they took it back again, and then they, like, changed it to the Cycle Frontier, and they turned it into a proper extraction shooter. And they've said that, yeah, like, it's not financially viable. Like, they can't make enough money from it. So they're shutting it down in September. Which is kind of surprising. Like, partly, I've seen lots of people over the last couple of years being like, oh, extraction shooters are the next big genre. Like, extraction shooters are the next big thing. And I think it's kind of telling that the big studios aren't making them. And indie versions of them seem to be shutting down. So you've got this point where the Hunt Showdown is doing better than it ever has done right now. I don't know how Escape from Tarkov's doing, because it's hard to see numbers or anything for that, but I know on Steam and stuff it's not doing as well as it was. And then you think of, like, modes like DMZ. I don't think DMZ did quite as well as people maybe expected. I definitely felt like DMZ just wasn't as successful as people maybe wanted it to be. Like, I feel like there's not many people playing DMZ, to be honest. And, like, you know, Division Heartland was meant to be Ubisoft's big extraction shooter. Ubisoft just had a showcase, and Division Heartland wasn't anywhere to be seen, even though apparently they've been doing closed tests for it for a while. Like, they weren't showing it off, which to me, with Ubisoft, normally means that it's going to get cancelled. I just feel like the extraction shooter thing isn't really happening. Like, I just feel like the moment's passed. And, like, now with the Cycle shutting down, as the Cycle being one of the big kind of other extraction shooters, it's a worry. And one of the really interesting things, I had a quick look at, like, how many people are playing the Cycle Frontier, because it's only available on Steam, so you can literally see how many people are playing. And it's not actually that bad. Like, the Cycle Frontier is, when I last looked, it had like 2,000 people playing. If I look now and its Steam charts, the Cycle Frontier. Right now, it's got 885 people. It's on a dip, you know, because everything goes up and down. But its 24-hour peak is 1,500 people. That's not that bad compared to a lot of games. You know, having 1,500 people playing your game at a time isn't awful for, you know, for a smaller game. And if that means, like, that's not sustainable, because I think a lot of these, quite a lot of these, you know, indie FPS type games that run as a games of service, they need there to be constant income. They need there to be constant revenue. They need people to be buying the microtransactions, to be caring about all of that sort of stuff. And if you've got, like, less than, I'd love to know what the threshold is, but if you've got less than, like, 2,000 people playing, then you're going to be struggling. You know, it's interesting, like, just put that 1,500 people, that puts it in the same kind of league as Elite Dangerous, which I thought was quite a successful game. That's got 1,950 people right now. Aliens Dark Descent, which is a new game that just came out, that's on 1,986 people. I'm just trying to have a look through if there's any other things that people that have that kind of similar thing. World of Tanks, at least the Steam version, 1,700 people. Any other games of service type things? I think there's quite a lot of games that are Subnautica, 1,500. The Division 2, 1,600, or a lot of people play that on Ubisoft and stuff like that. Formula 1 2023, that's on a similar amount of people. And it's more than some other games. Darkest Dungeon 2, Red Dead Online is only on 1,300. It's just kind of interesting looking at kind of where's that threshold for a game has now failed and can't carry on. And I'd love to know like how many people are playing other extraction shooters right now. Dr. Dynamite said the cycle's good. It's a shame it never came to console. It's a perfect console game. I would say I've played quite a lot of the cycle when it came out and when it was in the last beta and then when it first came out. And I would say it struggles with variety. Like basically every time you go into the game, it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing over and over again. And that's kind of a shame. That's a mistake to have a game that is meant to be a game service. And like every time you go to the world, it's basically, I think it's always one map, isn't it? But it's just different parts of the same map. The fights always feel the same because all the guns are quite similar to each other. There's just not enough like different things that can happen. And I think like Hunt Showdown managed to do a decent job of like the matches in Hunt Showdown are quite short and the environments are, fairly different, although I think that's something they could probably work on over time. But it's, it's got a super different feel to it. It's got a completely different atmosphere to anything else. And, Escape from Tarkov, similar, very different atmosphere to a lot of things, lots of different maps, lots of different variety, lots of different opportunities, to have different kinds of fights and stuff like that. The cycle felt like you were just grinding. You were just going in, doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And I think that got old very, very quickly. But, I say that as if I'm some sort of expert. Dead by Daylight's doing incredibly well. And that, as far as I can tell, is the exact same thing over and over and over again. So some people love that, clearly. But yeah, kind of a bit of a shame that the cycle is shutting down. But I think, again, it is kind of a sign of things to come. I'm always really interested in the idea. I was watching a video a while ago. I think it was Tom Scott did a video where he was talking about how all this AI stuff, whatever you think about ChatGPT and, the thing that draws pictures and the AI generated videos and stuff like that, whatever you think about it, it definitely feels like we're at a point where stuff's going to change dramatically. Like that is going to change things dramatically. Like I've already seen some people being like, hey, I'm just using the AI art generation things now to make my thumbnails on YouTube. Lots of people are like, yeah, I'm using it to make a logo. I'm using it to make short bits of video. I'm using it to make transitions, blah, blah, blah. People are using it to write code and stuff like that. All of those things that previously someone would have paid someone to do on Fiverr, now people are like, oh yeah, well, what's the point of paying a human to do this and having to wait like a day or two for them to get the thing and having to argue, blah, 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 when I can do this for free and I can get something that's good enough because, I'm just making content. I'm not making high quality shows. Instead, I'm just making some content. I can just use AI to do it. And, people have been using AI for voiceovers and stuff like that for ages. And it feels like we're at this kind of moment where everything's going to change. Like, and I completely agree with that. I think like there's obviously a lot of problems with intellectual property law and stuff like that with AI, but I definitely think things are going to change. We're suddenly at a moment where I used to think like, oh, if I was giving a kid advice on what they could get into that would be a secure job for the future, coding and stuff like that seems like a great idea. Now it's like, nope, absolutely not. I don't think coding is, I genuinely think knowing how to code at a very low level, it's going to very quickly become an obsolete job. Like really quickly. I think it's going to be very, very quickly, we're going to get to the point where you just tell a machine what you want to do and it will just kick out the code for you really quickly and then you can refine it from there. And people say like, oh, but then you need someone to code the machines. That's not true. That's never been true. When people said like, oh, robots going to take over everyone, so you need someone to design the robots and you need someone to maintain the robots. No, you don't. Other robots will do that. Like it's a sort of self-completing system. The only thing that you need humans for is the creative part, the part of like coming up with the ideas in the first place. And I think like that's kind of scary. That's kind of a bit of a a worry that it's like you can see AI as like pushing out any need for humans to do any work. So you know, people have always said coming up with ideas is easy, it's the execution that's hard. AI is kind of solving that problem. And I think it's going to solve it very, very quickly. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm talking about with stuff like the cycle. Is it's a similar kind of feeling that when you see these little things like Mojang pulling out of the subreddits, Twitter starting to die a little bit and getting a bit shaky, the Cycle Frontier deciding that they can't keep a game running with 2,000 people a day playing it. I think all of these things are kind of like a sign. You know, that all of them are kind of like an omen of, oh, I can see how this is shifting. I can see how this the game industry is changing. I think we're going to be very quickly moving to a point where game developers don't interact with the communities anywhere near as much as they do right now. I think we're going to be moving to a point where games as service aren't seen as viable anymore and aren't seen as something to chase after, because it's just so likely that you're going to pump millions of dollars into development and then get nothing out of it at the end. I think all of these things are kind of just a hint of what's about to change, if that makes sense. And a similar thing with streaming things. You know, I've been saying for a while, I don't think people doing what I do, like streaming games, making videos about games, I just don't think it's sustainable. I think like very quickly we're going to end up with channels. We're going to go back to the idea of there are very few big channels, and that's what people subscribe to. And people make content for those channels as a contract, rather than everyone essentially busking. I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's like just a sign of what's going to happen. That all of these things are signs of those sorts of things happening. Anyway, I don't want to tread too much ground, so we're going to have a quick roundup of some of the stuff that's been going on with the whole Microsoft Activision acquisition, because there's been a bunch of stuff like that happening. I don't think any of it's super interesting, but I want to rattle some of it off because someone was asking me about it yesterday. First of all, Jim Ryan has said that he didn't see Starfield exclusivity as anti-competitive, but doesn't like it, which I thought was really interesting. I don't like this Jim Ryan guy. Like, from what I see, the stuff he says, it always winds me up a bit. It's the Xbox fanboy in me, probably. But he said, you know, yeah, he didn't like Starfield being exclusive to Xbox, but he doesn't think that's anti-competitive. Obviously, he wouldn't really have a leg to stand on because Sony have made lots of games anti-competitive. It was also an interesting thing to note that he said, oh, if they did something like make the Elder Scrolls 6 exclusive to Xbox for a year, that essentially just makes it a Microsoft exclusive. Like he was saying that, or if Call of Duty was exclusive to Microsoft for like the first 6 months every year, that would essentially make it a Microsoft exclusive. Because I posted a thing about this, like just a TikTok about it, or a YouTube short on my Starfield channel, GP Starfield, check it out on YouTube. And I posted a thing about it saying that like, oh, well, you know, like maybe like Sony have been saying that it's terrible that Microsoft are making Starfield exclusive, but like Microsoft apparently bought ZeniMax, bought Bethesda, because they were worried that Sony would make Starfield exclusive, because they did that with Ghostwire Tokyo and they did it with Deathloop. They made it exclusive to PlayStation for a year. And it's like, someone replied to that saying sort of like, oh, well, like, does this mean that PlayStation are going to get Starfield after a year? I don't think so. But it's like, I don't think it even matters. I don't think the difference between something being exclusive for a year or being exclusive forever, I don't think it's that great, because people who want to play Starfield will probably play it in the first year. So they'll probably, you know, buy an Xbox or a PC to play it on if that's what they care about. Like the difference between a year exclusivity or full-time exclusivity is pretty small. Anyway, right, Jim Ryan, the PlayStation CEO, also said publishers unanimously do not like Game Pass because he said it is value destructive to games. And a bunch of developers have come out and argued with that. A bunch of people who publish games on Game Pass. So like the head of the Football Manager series spoke out to a few tits saying it's been nothing but positive for them because it means that loads more people play the games. And kind of interesting that they were saying that the Football Manager developer was saying the sales for Football Manager have been better than usual with the game being on Game Pass on things like PlayStation and stuff like that, because it just means more people are talking about the game, more people, you know, their friends are playing it and stuff like that. And it's like, if a game is on Game Pass and you don't have an Xbox, it still means more people you know are playing that game, so you're more likely to get it yourself. You know, I'm always guilty of that. If all my friends are playing something, I'll buy it to give it a go. And yeah, so they were saying that, and then Sega, who published it, said something similar. Anna Downing, who's the senior vice president of publishing at Sega Europe, said she's really happy with the results from Game Pass, and we hope Microsoft are too. Ultimately, they wanted quality titles. We wanted to take advantage of a great new opportunity. And she pointed to 2 Point Hospital. When that launched on Game Pass, they said that it reached 3 million players worldwide, which was amazing for that franchise. Like, it wouldn't have reached anything like that if it wasn't for Game Pass. I just think, like, so Jim Ryan from PlayStation is saying, oh no, Game Pass is terrible for everyone. And then there's all of these publishers and developers being like, no, we love it. Like, if you're making a slightly niche game, Game Pass is incredible because it means that you're suddenly getting to this like huge audience. It's like that Alien Dark Descent game that just came out and now only has 1,500 people playing it. If that was on Game Pass, there'd be way more people playing it, like an insane amount more people playing it. But they're not, because it's on Steam, and therefore only people who really care about it are on there. AirMax said, do you expect Game Pass to be pulled or the price increased? They've said that the price is getting increased. Yeah, as House just said, they've put the price up. I still think I don't get Game Pass for free. I pay for Game Pass because I don't really have any connections to Xbox in the UK, sadly. But yeah, I still pay for it just because I think it's such an incredible deal. And, this year, getting Starfield and Forza with it, like, that's essentially worth the price of Game Pass for the entire year. And then you get all of these extra cool things for free. I just think Game Pass is amazing. But yeah, so that was funny. And then Mike Rose, who runs indie publisher No More Robots, also agreed. So there's some indie developers also being like, yeah, like, Game Pass has been amazing. It means more people have heard of our games. More people are willing to give our games a try. More people are talking about our games. Our games are getting streamed more, all of those sort of things. There was also a funny thing where a bunch of documents that Sony provided to the FTC were redacted very poorly, which meant that we found out a few interesting snippets from that. There was a bunch of stuff in this. I don't think most of it was interesting, but there was one bit that Last of Us Part 2, basically the reason these were redacted poorly is someone had scanned them in after redacting them with a Sharpie, and because of the way scanning works, you could actually just still see what it said underneath it. And so we could see that Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million to make and had 200 employees, which I thought was interesting. $220 million. That's such an insane amount of money. Obviously, it made more than that, but it's just a huge thing. When you think of like, oh, why don't more developers make something like Last of Us Part 2? That's why. That's like, how many developers can afford to spend $220 million on something before they start seeing any return on it? Like, that's an insane amount of money, just absolutely crazy. And I don't think that was with marketing included. I think that was just the development of the game. Paying 200 employees costs a lot of money. I feel like 200 employees, that that means it's $1 million for each employee was spent on that game. But then you think, how many years did it take to make? Like 6 years to make that game, something like that, 5-6 years. So if you've got each person making, the equivalent of $200,000 a year, like, maybe that would make sense. So where did the rest of that money go? Was it on like studios? Was it on technology? Was it on, I don't know, what else? Licensing for something? Voice actors? It'd be really interesting to know where that money came from. Like, where did that 220 million get like cut up by? And then another thing that was kind of interesting, and it just related to Call of Duty, was they said, this is just talking about the Sony platform, but over 1 million players last year spent 100% of their gaming time just playing Call of Duty. So last year, there was over 1 million people who play on PlayStation that the only game they played was Call of Duty. That I thought was kind of, it's not surprising, because obviously I feel like a lot of us probably know some people who only play Call of Duty. Like, that's the only game they play. They're not gamers, but they will play Call of Duty. They will play Warzone. I thought that was really interesting, that 1 million players will spend 100% of their gaming time just playing COD. That's really interesting. And that's kind of, gives you an idea of why Sony are worried about Call of Duty going exclusive or something like that, because that's 1 million people on your platform that are only playing one game. That's kind of crazy, and it gives you an idea of the kind of pool that Call of Duty has. But yeah, so that's pretty much all the news. I do want to do kind of a thing when we do this podcast on Mondays, quickly going through the game releases. But there's not really any good new games coming out this week. There's a game called New Heights, which is a PC climbing and bouldering game. It's a bit weird. You like have someone holding onto the side of a mountain. It's meant to be a bit more of a simulator, but like you move like each hand, each leg, each foot, each hand, each foot individually using your mouse. You kind of click on where you want them to go, which is kind of interesting, I thought. I don't think that would have done very well, except for that Only Up game doing so insanely well over the last few weeks. That, you know, maybe it'll get a boost from that. Anyway, that's coming out on Thursday on PC, New Heights. There's also a game called Synapse on PSVR 2 that's getting some crazy reviews, which I would love to be interested in, but I can't afford PSVR 2, so I'm not. Ulterium Shift is out on Thursday, and that's a PC retro-inspired JRPG that has 3 different stories and ways to explore the map based on which character you pick. That's launching into early access, which I thought was kind of odd for an RPG. Like I say in Baldur's Gate, how many people want to play an RPG in early access, knowing that a better version of it's going to come out like a year later? That seems utterly bizarre. Ulterium Shift is a... Oh, sorry, that's the one I just talked about. Guilt is also coming out on Thursday, and that's a PC and console game that's going to be a narrative adventure game with puzzle, stealth, and action. It looks kind of creepy. You play as like this little girl creeping around this sort of half-abandoned mountain town. Bit horror-y, bit like spooky mannequins and stuff like that. It says you are confronted with the emotional impact of your actions, which, I don't know, sounds like a grandiose way to describe it. I'm probably not going to play it because it's got those stealth elements. And I just hate sneaking around in games. I don't mind it in games like Hitman or like Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed, where you're sneaking around and taking people out, and Far Cry, where you're sneaking around and taking enemies out. But when you can't take the enemies out and you're just sneaking around and hoping they don't see you, I've just never found that fun in games. I can't think of a single game where I enjoyed that. Like Alien Isolation, I loved the way that game looks, but I just don't enjoy the gameplay. I just don't find it fun, which is a shame. Anyway, that's everything from me. So I hope you enjoyed that. Like I said, I'm going to give maybe a little bit of... I'm going to give Kick a go. I'm going to try streaming on Kick a little bit today. Just playing a little bit of DMZ, try a bit of DMZ solo. So if you want to check me out, if you want to check out my streaming today, I probably will be back on Twitch for the rest of the week, but I'll just see how this goes. The link, I'll just put it in chat. I think that should be it. That's where it is. So I'm literally going to be carrying on a stream. I'm already streaming this podcast over there. So I'm going to end the YouTube stream and then hop on over there to stream some of that. So if you want to follow me, go follow me over there. Check it out. If not, I'll see you next time we do this podcast. Just check an eye out for your YouTube alerts. Put the little bell on so you get an alert when I go live. And then I'll see you then. Goodbye. Boop, boop. And then I also need to hit the Audacity. Goodbye.